Thank you very much, Atakelti, and good morning to everyone. And thank you for attending this seminar. I know that it's the end of the semester, so most of us are tired and just wanted to go. But yeah, so hopefully I think this is the last one.
It's okay if you mess it up.
There's another. All right, so our presentation is actually about pre-commitment. And our title is Does Pre-Commitment Work in Increasing Adoption of Agricultural Technology? And essentially, we have actually done a behavioral experiment. So as Atakelti said, I am co-presenting with my co-researcher. So this presentation we have is based on our work in the Eastern Gangetic Plains of South Asia, but mainly in India. So just a brief background. I'm not sure if any of you are from India here. No one from India. But I think, most of us have heard obviously about India because it's actually second most populous country with about 1.2 billion people. Actually, it's the seventh largest country in the world. It also has fast economic growth. In fact, in the last few years, it has been experiencing, about 10% growth rate. But of course, the COVID would have affected that. So like many countries in the world, it has slowed down. A fast growing country. And, there's a lot of, if you go to India, it's almost like, some parts, it's like you're in a developed country, but in some parts, you're in a developing country. So about 2/3 of the population live in poverty, on about less than $2 a day. But also there's a large portion that's extremely poor. So when we say extremely poor, they actually live on less than $1.25 a day. And to make things worse, as everywhere in the world, we are experiencing climate change. But climate change is really affecting agriculture in India. And in fact, in some places there are, increasing occurrence of floods, and in some areas, increasing occurrence of drought. So they're actually having both sides of the coin here. So because of climate change and also many other factors as well, declining soil fertility, agricultural productivity is far below actually the highest ranked countries. For example, for wheat, in the UK, the productivity is about 8 tons per hectare, but in India, it's only about 2.8 tons or 2.77 tons. And in rice, for the US, sorry, that figure is for the US, it's 7.37 tons per hectare, but in India, it's 2.9. And to compound things, population is also growing. So declining productivity and increasing growth is actually potentially going to be a problem for the Indian population. So to improve agricultural productivity and also improve their resilience in a sustainable manner, conservation agriculture-based sustainable intensification technologies have been introduced and are being promoted in India. It's probably in the last 5-7 years, maybe even 10. And two big projects actually that's going on in India is one is the SRFSI project, which I'm involved in, the Sustainable Resilient Farming Systems Intensification Project, which is funded by ACR and BFAT, and also the partner countries. And then there's a US funded project, a big US funded project called CCAPS in France. And let's see, some of you have been working, I think maybe have been working on the CCAPS project, I think, as well, but in Africa. So it's also happening in South Asia. So despite the promising results that we have seen, because there are now increasing number of papers that show, in fact, some of our students have been doing some studies on this, and they're showing that the CASI is actually very beneficial. It increases yield, it increases productivity and income. But despite that, CASI adoption has still been low, even in the last few years. And we just found some data that out of over 30 million cultivated land, cultivable land, only 3.37% are actually under CASI. And that's also partial ZT, not full CASI as well. Okay, so why is this happening? So adoption is a complex process, as we all know. Adoption is influenced by numerous factors like farm characteristics, and many of you know this because some of you have been doing adoption modeling. So farm characteristics, farmer characteristics, socioeconomics, also the technology characteristics itself and perceptions of farmers about the technology, institutions, markets, policies. So it's affected by a whole gamut of things. And the conventional belief, or the, even in developing countries, is that farmers are economically rational. So if it's good for them, they will adopt them. I do remember having this, conversation with some sociologists before when I was in the Philippines, and they said, no, farmers are rational. They're not adopting because it's not beneficial for them. But how is it that even when there is increasing evidence that CASI is good for them, it increases their income significantly, yet, many farmers are still not adopting? Now, increasingly, there are empirical studies that show that decisions to adopt new technology are not only affected by economic motivations, but also by behavioral factors. Now, behavioral economics is actually not new. It has been actually applied in many fields, particularly in marketing, in health. For example, trying to encourage people also to change their consumer behavior or their food consumption behavior. So it has been actually used, but it's not much used in agriculture yet. So why actually, would farmers, for example, not adopt CASI even when they feel that, even if they see the evidence is there that it's going to be good for them? Because we humans always do not always act rationally. So we are emotionally and easily distracted beings. We make decisions that may not necessarily be in our self-interest. We are not robots. If we are a robot, they can program us and we will do what is, we will probably be doing our own optimization and do what's best for us. But we are not like that. We sometimes procrastinate. We have cognitive limitations. We often value the present over the future. And we sometimes overestimate good occurrences, sometimes making us choose irrelevant choices. And there's many more. And this is where behavioral economics come in. So with behavioral economics, we are actually trying to steer away from pure neoclassical economics. So in behavioral economics, we sort of use psychology as well. So we are marrying economics and psychology. And we recognize that we humans do not always act rationally, and that sometimes, we actually should also think about the psychology part of things. Why do we do things? How can we do this though? The question for us in the field is, how can we use this to look at adoption, to examine adoption, and maybe not just to examine adoption, but to use this to actually try and nudge farmers to adopt. So knowing this, for example, what if we understand human behavior better and then use this to design policy to try to make adoption faster and bigger, so larger adoption and faster adoption. But the issue for us is that, sometimes, although even if we know that this could happen, actually, we don't really know why is it that it's happening. So many people say, oh, maybe it's because of chance, etc. So what we can do here is actually, if we design an experiment properly using, for example, RCT, we can really say that the change is because of this treatment. So what are some of the influencers of behavior change? There are many instruments that we can use to make people do things, So for example, some would be like the use of the messenger, the right messenger, for example. So if somebody tells you to do something, like, oh, you should do this, you should study this, but that person, is not a very good student, will you follow him or not? If somebody who is getting straight A's tell you this is a good strategy, maybe you're more likely to listen. So the messenger is important, similar to adoption as well. If a farmer who you don't know talks about CASI, why will you adopt? But if you actually hear a lead farmer and for example, an awarded farmer to talk about CASI, you're more likely to believe that person. So the messenger is important. Incentives are also important, and the incentives can be cash, or it could also be other forms of incentives. And the norms. We all, or most of us, would like to be seen as part of the group, isn't it? So when people do something, you don't want to be seen as like, an outsider. So you actually want to try and do things as well. So social norms also influence us. And then the defaults. So we go with the flow of preset options. So it makes things easier for us. If there's a default, even like in computer programs, we use the default. If you don't understand all the options, we just go for the default. So the default actually encourages us to do things unknowingly. And then salience, we would do something, or we are attracted in, things that are novel. or things that have meaning to us. It doesn't mean anything to us, maybe we won't be very much convinced. And same with priming, affect, and then commitments and ego. So in this particular study that we have, there are two things that we are focusing on. Actually, the main thing is commitment, but we also wanted to test whether that's sufficient. So we're looking at both commitments and incentives, micro incentives. So this study, as I mentioned, is part of our research in India. And the objective of this particular component of the study is to examine whether pre-commitment will increase adoption of CASI technology in West Bengal, India. So the question is that, will pre-commitment increase adoption? But further, will pre-commitment be enough to nudge farmers to adopt? So what we are, there are two terms that I'm using here. One is pre-commitment, and then the other one is micro-incentive. So what is pre-commitment? So pre-commitment is a strategy or a method of self-control that an agent may use to restrict the number of choices available to that individual at a future time. By the way, this can be self-imposed. So say, for example, if you want to improve your study habits, you can actually make a pro-commitment that you made yourself, so it's self-imposed, but it could also be a public pre-commitment. And studies have shown that, sometimes when you pre-commit publicly, you will be embarrassed not to do it because you have already told people. So we wanted to try that in this context. But then the second aspect we're also looking at is micro-incentives. So when I say micro-incentives, it's small rewards given out on a behavior basis, on a core behavior basis. So the research methods we did is for testing, the impact of the treatment we have, which is the pre-commitment. So we use RCT, and I think you are all familiar with RCT, where we actually randomly assigned the individuals that are part of our study to either the control group, and we have two treatment groups. One is pre-commitment only, they pre-commit, and then the other one is a pre-commitment plus a micro-incentive, which is the micro-incentive. I'll just explain a bit further. So this is our RCT design. So we have the control group is we have for all so that they're in the same playing field. Okay, we have some criteria for selection. And maybe Dr. KK will talk about it, but one of it is that they should have at least heard of CASI, but the adoption should not be high. It's outside our original SRFSI sites. Because if adoption is already high there, even if we give them the treatment, we will not be able to measure the real effect because those who wanted to adopt have adopted already. So we have to go to a site that is outside the original project site, but they should at least hear of CASI. And to make sure that they're on the same playing field, we showed an orientation, and Dr. KK will talk about it. We had an orientation which was done for all of them, talking about what is CASI and what are the benefits of CASI. So it was done for the control group, plus the treatment 1 and treatment 2 groups. In treatment 1, they have an option to publicly pre-commit. And there's a contract that they will sign. And then in treatment 2, there's the orientation as well as the option to publicly pre-commit plus a 10% discount. But the 10% discount, they will only get that if it's 1 hectare. Okay? But that means because they're mostly smallholder farmers, the only way they can get 1 hectare is to form cluster farms. So they have to cluster. Okay, and Dr. KK will explain. Our target was 100 per treatment group, but the one this is a preliminary result we're showing because we still have to collect some data for the others. So this is based on 79 control, 80 of treatment 1, and 62 of treatment 2. And we looked at both for the data, we collected both stated and revealed data. So this is the process. So we collected pre-treatment baseline data during the rabi season, and then we conducted the experiments using randomized control trial, and then we also collected the post-treatment data. So after the rabi season, because during the treatment we asked them how many, will you commit? Will you adopt CA? So that's their stated preference. But then after the season, we really examined what's the revealed preference. Did they actually do it or not? Did they adopt or not? Then in the analysis, we merged the two data sets. So we have the pre-treatment baseline and the post-treatment. And then we analyzed the impact of the treatments using difference in difference model. And then we further analyzed the stated versus revealed preference. And I think this is important because for some of us, when we don't have time, we just ask them, they're stated. But is the stated really the same as the review? I'll pass on to Dr. KK to explain the behavioral field experiment.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Dr. Pei, you remain here for the change of slides, etc. I'm just explaining this one. Before explaining this one, I just want to give some additional background of the sites where we are worked. Actually, this is the place where the main source of income is agriculture. That more than 70 to 80% of the farm income is coming from the farming resources. Same is the most of the people, they have the marginal land holding. They are marginal not in sense of the only the land holding, but also in the investment capacity, and also their risk-taking ability, and also the gross margin respect. So, and when the CASI has come, the conservation agriculture, that it is basically a mechanized system which was not there in that farm economy. So, and it involves zero to waste machine application and also the supplementary machinery. So because the farmers is not having the capacity to buy their own machine, so they were depending on some others called the service providers. So gradually with the popularization of this CASI technology, the service providing agencies like the Farmers Club, the Farmers Producers Organizations, or the Farmers Producer Company, they come into the field. So in this way, the system was going on, and the technology, as Dr. Pei has told, that people are very much convinced about the merit of the technology, and it was supposed to be picking up, but it was not picking. So why? The question comes here, the question of service provisioning. We found that in service provisioning, two sides are there: the service provider and the supplier, and the demander, that means the farmers. But there was a gap in between them. Sometimes, as for example, I am telling the machineries, the indent has been given by the farmers, but it has not reached in due time. This is one example. Another example, contrasting example, is that the farmer has committed that he'll be doing some thing, and the service provider brought his machine, but the farmer then withdrawn. So in this way, there was a very much harikiri in the system. So in our FGTs and also in our the baseline survey, what we found is that the service, some modalities has to be made, and also the behavioral instinct or the shakiness of the farmers are hampering maybe one of the reason for hampering the progress of this adoption of CASI technology, which is promised to be a very good technology here. So for that, we conducted this experiment, and in this conducting the experiment, we are having totally 15 sites. As in the previous slide, Dr. Pei has shown that we are having 3 treatments. One is including the control T0, T1, and T2. In each treatment, we are having 5 applications. The experiment has been conducted in North Bengal situation. In North Bengal, basically 2 districts we have covered, which is Cochbihar and Malda. So the sites we have selected, and these are the sites. And we have categorically, we have tried our best so that the mixing of the treatment groups or the replications under any treatment is not that one. So we try to avoid it. So that's why we have kept, this is the T0, the red one, the T1 is the blue one, and the T2 is the, I think it is green one. Yeah. So if you can see that the locations, that there is far distance in between these replications. So the only thing is that nobody will be knowing what is going on in other places. Yes, we admit that this is the age of internet, that maybe, but we have tried our best to keep it as much as possible. So these are the sites. In total, 15 sites, 3 treatments, 5 replications. Okay. And these are the, in 2 districts in Coachbihar, 3 treatments, 3 replications are there, and in Malda, 2 replications are there in each treatment. So these are the sites and name of the sites. Actually, these sites, when we have conducted, before conducting this RCT, we have conducted the baseline survey also. And during that period, we have selected these sites. And while selecting these sites, we have consulted with the service providers in each locations. So in total, 15 service providers are there, and we have consulted with them regarding the choice of the treatments, where the control can be assigned, where the treatment 1 can be assigned, and where the treatment 2 can be assigned. Next, please. Yeah. Now, so now we are coming to our process of process of the experimentation. Basically, in our experiment, 3 orientation and 3 extension materials are there. One is the leaflets. These are the examples of the leaflets. What are there in these leaflets? In these leaflets, that what we have told in very brief, that what is CASI, that conservation agriculture, and what is the possible merit of it, the economic merit of it. That this is the number 1, the first one we have described here. In the second one, the service providing contact, that in what are the service providing themes that that is being given, and the possible rate. And in the third one, we have given that it is being given the service providing rate and the rate after discounting, because in T2 we have kept it that 10% discounting if it is a clustering of 1 hectare is there. So I want to explain here what is the clustering is that the service providing, the service, it is coming from the service providers, that the service providing is to bring the machine and give the service to the clients. Now, when the farmers are in isolation, then it is becoming a problem for the service providers. So it is always easy for the farmers and for the service providers that when the land will be in a contiguous areas, not in just the neighboring areas, but if it is contiguous areas, then the movement of the farm machinery, it will be easier, and it will be easier for both the farmer and for the service providers. So to have a win-win situation. So that's why the incentive, if it is being clustered, then the 10% discount it will be given, that is being told. So in this, this is the leaflet, and we have provided some short video films also. So short video films we have developed on boro paddy, on wheat, on maize, on mustard, etc. And we have provided just simply nothing, that the methodology of CA principles, how it is working, and what are the salient things to be done, etc. This is there in the video. In the orientation program, we have shown it. Next. So, and as because we have told that in your T2 and T3, we are having we will be export them for some commitment. The pre-commitment will be having, this was absent in the field, and this was creating a nuisance. So we from both the farmers and the service providers, it came. So we have formalized a draft of agreement. In this agreement, both the service provider and the farmers, they will be signing. Here, this is for here it is the farmer's signature, and here it is the service provider signatures. The same we have made for this. This is for T2, T1, and this is for T2. That means the service providing in clustering. So the basically the theme is same, but here if we discounting will be given, that is being spelled out. So here also the signing of the farmers and also the service providers will be there. So this is another extension materials that we have provided. Next. So these are the training actually, because this experiment, conducting the experiment, our basic sense was that to make the field agents that who will be conducting the experiments on behalf of us will be there. We are conducting, but they are our accessories, like the service providers, like the field agents who will be monitoring the fields, etc. So their training, their understanding was very much important. So we, the scientists of this zone, we have gone in each locations. We have tried to be present in the orientation program. Before that, their understanding, their training, etc. What is this experiment is, and what is the objective of it, then we have explained both in virtual mode and also in physical mode. Next. So now, what is the result? So let us see some results, some basic characters is there in between the age, the farming experience, the household size, average area, the educational backup, etc. In general, I can tell that basically these groups are also almost homogeneous in nature. From socioeconomic tests, we can tell that in terms of, say, experience, the experience is around 25 to 26 years. The education is up to junior high school. That means standard 7 or standard 8. It is their education, and also the land holding is around just 1 hectare. Around they 7.74, 7.7, sorry, 8.57, 7.28, 6.75. That means just on and around 1 hectare, the land holding is there. Basically, there is no difference in between these groups. Okay, next. And now we have here we can the interesting thing we can watch here. This is the graph. What we are showing is that the pre-treatment. That means the baseline, from the baseline survey. This is the allocation pattern. That is the overall. This is the control situation. That means T0. This is T1 and this is T2. If we see the post-treatment result of this, we can see that in all these cases there has been some changes. Suppose this blue one, this maize. So if we can control this, it was the situation earlier. Now it has come here, which was around 0.20, it has come to 0.60 in maize. And so also the T1, this is not there. And so also in this is wheat and maize here, this is boro and maize here. And so that means the transformation or the changing in positive way that has occurred. So I'm not in a situation now, right now, to tell that due to this experiment it has occurred. But anyhow, the difference between the pre-treatment and the post-treatment is being observed here in the allocation pattern of the land. Next. So now the CA adoption. So here also, what we are seeing is that this is the pre and this is the post. In all these cases, from 2.3, 1.37, 0.43, 1.80, 0.69, 2.65, that means the adoption of CA has increased quite a lot. So this is actually again confirming that something is there, and due to this pre-commitment treatments or the pre-commitment sense what we are intending for. Next. So now I'll be handing over to Professor Pei to explain that the observation we have got. Now the analytical view, what we have got. Over to Dr. Pei.
Dr. KK. So after the calculating those description observations, we then actually did the econometric modeling using the difference in difference model. But what we have found here is that for treatment 1, okay, there is an increase in the adoption. By the way, this is land use, not the number of adapters, because sometimes people will adapt, but the percentage is small. So we are more concerned at this stage. We will still do that as well, but in the econometric modeling, we will for now focus on the land area that they adapted. So there is a difference, but it is not significant. So the effect of the pre-commitment is not significant. It's here, period times treatment. But for model 2, the treatment is pre-commitment with the micro-incentive. It is significant. Mm. So it's so if we look at this, so I think it's easier to see it graphically. So the baseline actually, which is the control group, is here for our control group, and post-treatment, it actually also increased, even for control group, adoption increased. For the treatment 1 group, which is this purple line, this is the start. Initially, they already started higher anyway. They had higher adoption. And that's why we want the difference in difference. Because at the start, that's already, they're really higher. But it increased. However, of course, we're looking at, as I mentioned, there's that natural increase. So we're looking at the counterfactual. What will be the case if those under treatment 1 did not receive treatment? And the difference between those two, post-treatment, is 0.24, which is not significant. But for the pre-commitment with micro-incentive, the difference is quite significant. So basically, pre-commitment with micro-incentive, that's treatment 2, significantly increased at 10% margin of error, and that increased by 0.82 bigha, or 0.13 hectares. The next question for us is, what about the stated and the revealed? So did they actually say they will adopt? So we started off actually for the control group, so up to 79 of them. And then this is the average land, they had 1.23, and the revealed adoption is 1.37 bigha. For treatment 1, the stated is, they said 2.27, they will adopt 2.27 bigha, but the revealed is 1.8, it actually went a bit low. And for the treatment 2, 2.46, and it increased to 2.65. So if you look at this in terms of the figures, the stated for control, after they were shown the video, they said we will adapt. You know, all of them were shown the orientation video, and they underwent the orientation of the CASI, what's CASI, what are the benefits. So they said, oh, even control, 47.65%. Those under pre-commitment, 72.78 said they will adopt CA, and then in the treatment 2, 87.3% said they will adopt CA. But after, you know, the treatment was done, and after the season, the rabies season, we measured it again, and those who actually adopted the actual is 62.13% for the pre-commitment and 68.67% in 14 clusters. But the other thing we noticed is that there's a change as well. There's a change in the land, in the crops, as Dr. KK mentioned. So some of them didn't have boro wheat before, boro rice, and then they then adopted because the CA for boro rice was suitable, so they did that. So what are the key findings? So between the two treatments, pre-commitment with micro-incentive, or T2, significantly increased CA land allocation by farmers. And then comparing the stated versus the revealed preference, the pre-commitment without incentive had significantly lower revealed CA land allocation. So what they actually did is much lower than what they actually promised they will do, or what they stated they will do. Then pre-commitment may increase the stated land area of farmers allocated for CA. However, without micro-incentive, it will not likely result to higher adoption. And therefore, micro-incentive is an important feature in pre-commitment nudges to increase CA adoption. And then finally, and Dr. KK mentioned this, increasing farmers' pre-committed CA land via clustering to avail the micro-incentive is feasible, but actually it's also challenging. So we didn't discuss that much, but in terms of the future research, we actually have to find out, we have to dig deeper. So this part that we presented is only the quantitative part, but we actually have a qualitative part. So we're using mixed methods to understand why is this the case. Because sometimes just by numbers, you cannot really explain everything. And we're still doing further econometric analysis as well, including other factors. But as you know, we just got the data a few days ago, last Monday. So we were number crunching very, very fast. So this still will change once we get the full data set. So in conclusion, using a very small experiment, pre-commitment alone will not significantly increase CASI adoption, and it has to be paired with micro-incentive. Please. And also that the stated preference is not necessarily the same as the reviewed preference, which you probably know that already, but sometimes, you know, we tend to just, our research is based on the stated. Then we actually need to be careful about that because sometimes in adoption, that might not actually be the case. Okay, what is the future work? So we still have to extend the analysis to the impact on yield, revenue, and net income, because yes, they may have adopted, but so what? You know, did that really increase their yield, revenue, net income, and even, you know, some environmental, you know, we haven't really looked at, for example, the carbon dioxide, you know, emission, the reduction in that if there is. So we actually will extend that. Also, we have to test between the performance of the CASI versus non-CASI treatments. We also have to interrogate our data. We have the qualitative analysis data, but we need to analyze it to find out why is this, you know. We were hoping that just pre-commitment alone will be sufficient, but why did it? And actually, Dr. KK can explain further. One of the reasons, and Dr. KK can add more to this because he understands the situation where he was in the field, is that the pre-commitment they were asked to sign. Now, when they were asked before knowing that they will sign, they said, yes, we will adopt. But because there's a paperwork, it scared them off. They would rather have the verbal pre-commitment, but signing to them might mean that, oh, there might be litigation or what have you. You know, they were a bit scared. So maybe in future, actually the plan originally is not for COVID, that we will have a second round. So we can refine the experiment because we're just learning as well. So had we known that, we could probably have tested, you know, one with an actual formal signing of contract and one that's just publicly commit. You know, we just say to the group, I will do it. So maybe that would have been more effective for them because they're afraid of signing contracts. But once you give them micro incentive, that they will get a 10% discount if they can form a cluster 1 hectare basis and it is for a cluster. That was enough to push them, even if they have to sign. So maybe if you mix, you know, it's you see it as a package, it might work. So, but then there are other problems as well with clustering. It's another whole story again. So in this particular project, we have, some of you may have noticed, I've presented it a few times in other aspects of this. We actually have several other field experiments happening across South Asia. So we actually are testing how do you overcome cognitive limitation. And we are doing this by testing field visits, protocols, and video training. This is happening in Bangladesh. And then also framing of the video messages, framing it positively as against framing it negatively. Same message, but the framing is different. One is framed, you know, like it lost, and the other is gains. So we're testing that, and also using herd behavior by the video messages. So testing some videos where there's only one person, you know, promoting the say or showing it, as against showing them a group of people really practicing it. You know, so every element is the same. We do controls within the video itself, and then also gender. Will it make a difference if you have female farmers promoting CASI in terms of encouraging other females to actually adopt CASI? So we're doing that in Rajshahi, Bangladesh. And then we're also using competition and text messaging reminders in Nepal, and then social proof videos and phone call reminders in Bihar. And then we have one, and all of these are just small experiments, as in 300, 300 per group. If they have 4 treatments, then, you know, it's around that, probably between 280 to about 400 so small ones. But we have a large experiment that's currently running now across all countries, and we have 1,500 testing for text messaging reminders to adopt CASI. And yeah, we are hoping to get, because we really controlled for this, and same thing we did RCT. So we're hoping to see whether texting will be an effective nudge for farmers. So finally, I would just like to acknowledge, Dr. KK and myself presented, but there's a whole team behind this in West Bengal. So Dr. Apurva, Dr. Arunaba, and Dr. Deepa Roy, and so on. So we have Dr. Pratik, Dr. Abbas, Dr. Tapame, Dr. Biplap, and our research fellow, PhD student at Chung Lecture. So this is the West Bengal team. And also, of course, we would like to acknowledge ACR, who is the funder of this project. And our project is actually known as the Farmer Behavior Insights Project. We have a website for those of you interested. And we are now starting to get our results. So increasingly, we will be posting our research reports there. And of course, these are the other partners, UNE, we have Rajahi University, NARC IDRS, and also Bihar Agricultural University. So Dr. KK, do you want to say something or add something?
Not really. The only two things is that you have cleared it nicely that why the people are not in the T1, the pre-commitment, and that it is not there. Actually, it is a kind of inertia. You can tell that this is the zone where the neighboring Bangladesh is there. So infiltration problem is there, and the central government is planning for the NRC, etc. So like this is creating a inertia in the mind of the people when in the question of signing. So that maybe that inertia and that apprehension or anything. But when in the question of formal committee, it is there some of them withdrawn. But in T2, the incentives when it is coming, then the same people, the same bundle of people, they are being willing. So that's the thing is happening here, and we think that as Dr. Pei has told, that pre-commitment with the micro incentives, it can work nicely, and it can change as a nudge.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
We might be able to fit a couple of questions. Thank you for a very interesting and exciting presentation. Good to see these things happening across continents. I think this is the first one we have had where someone from outside is also presenting. So we will take questions. Mike?
I was just wondering whether the micro incentive process also has an element of social pre-commitment, in that I'm signing up something with a group.
Yeah.
So if I now pull out, I'm not just pulling out, I've decided I'm going to do it, I can always bail out on myself, but now I'm making a commitment to a group. I'm wondering whether it's possible to unpack whether it's that social pre-commitment as opposed to the money, which is actually getting them over the line. So if you ran a program where you got asked to do as a group and gave no money, would you still see the same?
Yeah, actually that is very, very true. In fact, some of the initial information, the qualitative, we're trying to unpack that, in terms of why. Maybe it's not really the 10% discount they get, but now I'm embarrassed because I will let the group down if I don't do it. So I think it's like similar to that, the finance in Bangladesh, where when you're in a group savings, in a savings group, you don't want to not pay in time because the others will not be able to borrow, in that group. So I'm also thinking the same thing. Now, mathematically, how to do that? It might because we didn't, we just.
Did you have a treatment where you had only micro incentives?
No. See, this exactly because when we had the problem is of course there's the budget and all that. So we learned from that. But the idea here was to have 2 rounds. So we can learn from the first, but because of COVID, now we can only have 1 round. So maybe that's a study for somebody, for somebody else. But we did actually, in another site, we have that time because we learned from this. They were the first one to do this. Because of COVID, the other sites were not able to do their experiments. So from that, we learned, no, in the next one, we should test, we should have 4 treatments. And not the same, it's not the same microincentive, but like testing video versus, training. So we can't just do video and then video plus training. You got to have video and then training, and then video and training. So we can unpack it. But for this, regrettably, we can't do it because we don't have that.
Yeah, I think in a group you can't get people to do anything.
Yeah, just following on this, you said a bit earlier that you're focusing on the behavior aspects. Were these, just trying to clarify this, were it in addition to or instead of the economic benefits?
Yeah.
Which one was it?
So we are still looking at, for example, like we're looking at the income effect and all that. But basically, what we're also looking is the difference in the treatment. So for example, like when we do those differences in the yield, so we will be comparing them by treatment group, but we're also looking at the CASI adapters and non-adapters as well.
Okay, the reason I'm saying this is often you have behavioral aspects being sort of opposed to the benefits, right? But what you're saying is these are the so-called objective benefits, as in revenue and yield and so on. But there's also something else, which is the perceived benefits. And the perceived benefits is somewhere in between the behavioral and the so-called classical benefits, right? So did you control for the perceived benefits?
Yeah. So for this model, because we only got 2 days actually on Monday, so we didn't have time to do it. But that's part of the plan. Because so we didn't only gather this, we actually have a whole lot of behavioral. We have a psychologist in our team. So we have behavioral questions as well, the perceptions. It's a very long, it's longer than the production information. So in the analysis, the later analysis that we will be doing, we will be including those factors. In fact, in our midterm review, for some initial results, I don't know if Rene Villano is here. So Rene did some of that. So we were actually clustering, some of these farmers and grouping them as well based on their behavior. And then whether there's a difference, some farmers will tend to be, so we did some factor analysis to try and find, the types of farmers. So we have a whole heap of behavioral questions that we can include in our econometric analysis. And we definitely be doing that. But for this particular presentation, there was just no time. Just focus on that action.
One question online from Asjad.
Diversity decline in the market. Okay, so the cropping that, and Dr. KK can say something, but because what happens is that, so we actually, for the CA actually is not just for wheat or rice, it can be for other crops. So it looks like, when you think about cropping diversity, it might have declined, but people actually shifted to a CA crop, which may not be original. For example, if they're originally planting, let's say, maize, but then they decided, oh, I will do boro rice because there's a CA on boro rice. In some cases, but for example, I actually don't know so if it will actually help them to focus more on wheat and rice, even if they have another crop, they might decrease the diversity of the crops, but they might increase the CA. They have increased the CA, but the diversity would have decreased. So we did not our assumption here is that hopefully by adopting CA, their income and yield will increase, but it could be at the expense of cropping diversity.
Do you have any expectation in terms of how much they will put in?
Like a particular.
It looks like the average area was around 7 or 8 hectares.
Yeah.
And the increases are around, in one group it was 0.24 and in the other about 0.8. Is that considered a big change?
Yeah, unless we did not set a target, but we were hoping it would be big. In fact, when we saw that the pre-commitment alone didn't increase much, we were actually saying, oh no, this is not what we expected. But then, trying to understand why, we found out, oh yeah, because they were afraid to sign.
There are upfront commitments. Could you land,
Yes,
because 0.8 hectares is huge.
yes.
And sometimes farmers will give you just a point for you to play around because they don't
Yeah.
really believe in the restart. So 0.8 is quite.
Point is actually quite big.
It's not hectare, it's bigger, much smaller than acre.
Oh, it's smaller. Okay.
Yeah.
But in relative terms, compared to
relative
the,
terms,
it's almost 10% of the land.
We actually did some adoption models, using Adapt before. So our calculation is that, depending on the type of the farmers, they could adapt higher. But we haven't applied that because we did that adapt model when we were doing the proposal. But then now it's at the time to make test whether the particular types of farmers will have tendency to adapt higher, and then what we do, then we can do the economics of it. Yeah, we take some of your.
Not sure if anyone is waiting outside, but we can take one more question and then wrap it up. Is there anyone? No? School is finished. So, yeah, if you have one more question, then we can do one more. If not, I can ask a question. Yeah. So, in terms of like commitment in the long term, so you are giving them an incentive of 10%. What does that mean? Like once the project is over, let's say you leave, what does it mean?
Good question.
Is that just to get them in and the technology is going to take, it's attractive enough to take, to make things?
Yeah, so actually what we wanted to do is initially to test the long-term effect. And that's the reason why we want to do it like second rounds as well. And the idea is that if it's successful in future, before we leave, we will promote it really. If we find it's effective, we can also, next year we will be actually doing a lot of training with the government, in this case, their extension departments on, the use of behavioral economics and stuff like that. Especially if we find it's effective. That's why we're doing RCT, because we don't want to promote something if it's not going to work. Because after the project, we have no control.
That's the other thing I was wondering about. So you were experimenting with these things,
Correct.
trying to get them to adopt and so on.
Yeah.
So what the extension services, do they do similar things or?
Not at this stage, but our plan, part of our project is the extension side. So once we do the RCTs, and then if we have evidence that it's working, then we can promote it with the government, so it's going to be the extension department. So that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
But it's kind of scary to make recommendations if you haven't tested. So that's why we want to test it first and check.
Take the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Okay. If there are no more questions, we will stop you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Das.